Hey, LCC friends and family. Lead Minister Brandon Bogue here with this week's Midweek Moment. We mentioned this at the start of last week, but anytime that we do anything consistently or repeatedly, it becomes rather difficult for us to hold on to the significance of what that thing might be. The more we do it, the less special it becomes to us, to the point that we just get to the point that it's brought in as part of the routine. We do it because we've always done it. So we end up getting to the point where we forget why this thing has become special to us in the first place. We just do what we've always done, and then we move on. And that is something that I'm afraid we let happen with the act of communion. It is the practice of our church to take communion every single time that we gather. And because we take communion weekly, it can become rather difficult for us to keep consistently in mind why we do that. Communion itself is actually one of the earliest practices of the church. The night before he went to the cross, Jesus himself established what communion was, even before the disciples themselves would understand the significance of what they were doing in that moment. But we see the practice itself established in Matthew chapter 26, verses 26 through 28. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." I do always find it striking that Jesus would establish this practice before going to the cross and showing exactly what he meant in this. But in communion, we are meant to remind ourselves of the sacrifice that Jesus made on our behalf. It's meant to serve as a reminder of the cost it took for us to have our freedom and release from the bonds of our own sinful choices. It's meant to be something that we take somberly and with gratitude, knowing that the redemption that we have was paid for in the broken body and the poured out blood of the Son of God himself. It is meant to be perhaps the most meaningful part of our collective worship service. And yet, it is rarely, if ever, treated as the most meaningful part of our collective worship service. It really does seem like churches that take communion on a regular basis, a weekly basis, that it is rarely ever treated with the reverence or the meaning that it should have behind it. It almost seems like we just kind of treat it as something of a checklist item, that we do this every week, so we've done it, we can move on. A lot of us, we take the tray, we grab the elements for ourselves, we maybe take it, and before it has been finished being served to the whole congregation, sometimes even before the tray has left our immediate vicinity, people are just kind of turning to the person that they were seated to next and asking, "Where do you want to go for lunch?" Or they're picking up the conversation that they started before the worship service began, or they're commenting on a specific worship song like we talked about last week. They're talking about really a million other things that bluntly could wait until the service is over. At the very least, it could wait until everyone has had a chance to take communion quietly and reverently. And the fact is when we take communion flippantly or lightly, we undermine the significance of the sacrifice of Jesus. That's not Brandon saying that. It's actually the Apostle Paul in his discussion on this practice that he wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 26 through 29. "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself." Communion itself is meant to be an act of worship. It is us taking a moment of quiet reflection, examining our hearts and expressing our gratitude for the mercy that Jesus gave us through the cross. If we cannot approach it with that mindset, Or if we're too distracted by a million other things like where we're going for lunch or what's up with the hairdo of the person 3 rows ahead of us, then it's better that you don't take it at all. Because communion is done as a reminder of the love that Jesus demonstrated on the cross for us. And that is why we do that. As a reminder, as we are in the month of May, we are going through the book Small Batch Discipleship by David Sunday. This is a little bit different than all of our other books of the month that we've discussed thus far. A lot of those have just been kind of practicing in our faith and that sort of thing. But this book is really more about how do we work in the notion of discipleship within our normal everyday rhythms and routines. One of the things I do love about this book entirely is that every time they have a chapter talking about an element of discipleship making, they also have a chapter immediately following it on how to establish that rhythm. There are parts of this book where you're able to write things if you're a person who likes to do that sort of thing. If not, maybe grab a notebook and have it off to the side. The Small Batch Discipleship by David Sunday is our book of the month, and I think it's one that's going to genuinely help you begin to make discipleship a part of your everyday practice. This has been your Midweek Moment. Take care of yourselves.